Welcome to Siofra's Magic Alcove. I am Ian. You probably heard my voice in the background before. I wanted to talk today a little bit about four-element cleansing of things. And the first thing I think we ought to go through is, why do you need to cleanse anything? Well, or do you? And that depends a lot on what it is you've got. And I will explain how this works. So, you have to believe, to start with, that objects can accept magnetism or be charged up by some form. And when you do that with your willpower. But if you buy an object at the store, for example, it has attached to it the energies and thought forms of all the people that have handled it, the people that manufactured it, the aspects of the people who, when you come right down to it, who actually dug the elements out of the earth, potentially, all the way back, and everybody who looks at it in the store, anyone can leave a thought form behind, especially if they're having a particularly bad day or a particularly good day or something like that. So you never know what energies are mixed with your object that you want to charge with your own energies. And to really get a result, your own energies have to overpower all these other energies and then get the result. So if you cleanse all these energies out of an object, then you've much better chance to get the result you're trying to get when you charge something up. If you go to a place where the forest hasn't been screwed around with much and you collect a stone or something, it probably doesn't need to be cleansed. It's probably good as it is from nature because it doesn't have a lot of people's thought forms attached to it. So you can kind of use that as one criterion, assuming something else hasn't happened, like you put some energy into it that needs to be cleansed out, which this will help with also. But that's why a new object would need to be cleansed, because nothing is made in a vacuum nowadays, especially. And you don't want all those energies mingling with the energy you have to put in it. And you know, if it's got 20 people's different mingled energies in there, that's almost like a bunch of background noise that your energy has to get through to charge it up. So that's one of the main reasons to cleanse things, and why they used to say in the old grimoires that it's better if you can make it yourself entirely from the raw materials for some of these things, but most of us can't do that, and especially nowadays. So a method of cleansing these things from the objects is needed, and there are many different methods. Most of the most effective ones are based on the four elements, though you can kind of cheat around that a little bit at the expense of a less thorough cleansing of the object. So that brings up another fact, though. If objects can be charged up like that, that's why you don't want somebody without the right mindset to view your magical objects or tools in particular, because they might get their thought forms caught up with what you're charging. And this is all relative, of course. My wife has no problem showing her wands on the video, which is fine. It's all depends a lot on the purpose, what you're aiming at, how strong you are. Of course, the more powerful you are, the better you can charge an object, and the less banishing you really need, but it's just a way to make things more efficient. Now, usually how these energies are banished from an object or removed is by using the four elements and bringing them in to do it directly. Now, Bartons Method, which uses the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, would have you do something on the order of hold it over a candle flame and envision the fire element coming through it, cleansing out all those aspects. Then you might sprinkle it with water, have that cleanse out the stuff from the object, or in sorry, it's right there. Where was I? Back to banishing the objects. Actually holding it in running water is better, much better than just sprinkling it, but sprinkling it can be done. You can, if it's suitable, a suitable object, bury it in the ground overnight. And every time you do this, you want to focus. If you're using the elements directly like that, you want to focus when it's in the water, that the water is taking away all impurities. If it's held above a flame, it's taking away all impurities. Obviously, you don't want to torch your brand new paper pentacle you made or something, talisman. So obviously a little bit of care is required. You can wave it in the air to have the air cleanse it. The main thing is the imagination with your willpower that that element is cleaning all aspects that that element can clean out of it, so that in the end you end up with a purified object with no aspects of the elements clinging to it, no thought forms and things. Now, two different things about that. Wiccan, or Wiccan-inspired, or witchcraft, usually uses salt and water. So you've got the earth and the water to sprinkle it, and then uses incense of some sort to smudge an item. A lot of people use sage, and you can bring the elements of fire and air up through it and cleanse it that way. So in that sense, even though you do two operations, you're using all four elements because they're combined in that form. So that works good. Of course, the more detailed you get, so if you go into each element, all four elements, you're going to get a much more thorough cleansing, because it's going to mean it takes longer time. So basically, it all depends on how much time you're willing to put into the process. Now, a couple of the other methods of banishing, there's one of which I prefer. I actually won't mention the ones that I don't prefer, because then I just get confusing. So instead, I'll tell you the one I prefer with the pentagrams. And one big advantage of doing things with the pentagrams, especially once you've worked with them and you know them, is that you can do these banishings without having to have implements handy. Of course, you know, if you want to banish it with an air dagger or an athame or a wand, you know, whatever you can do to increase the effect, the better. But you don't need to have the element right, or the item right out exposed directly to the elements either, in case it's sensitive to water, like you can't hardly run a paper talisman under running water very well, or you know, something of that nature. So what you do is you use the pentagrams, and we'll just, as an example, we'll start with one. We use a banishing pentagram of earth, which starts from the lower left corner, goes up, down, left, right, down. And then what that does, if you do that properly, and some people like to inscribe a symbol in it, like for the earth pentagram you might inscribe a Taurus symbol just to give an additional effect to the energy. But what this does, when you put this pentagram out, if you've learned to use the pentagrams properly, you can bring the element right through with it, and you can bring the astral element and the mental aspect of the element right through into the object, and have it cleanse out the impurities and go out the other side. And there are 4 pentagrams, one for air, fire, earth, and water, to invoke them. And there are 4 pentagrams, one for each element, to banish them. Now, I prefer to use the invoking pentagrams as I described to cleanse an object, and use the element pulled through it, down through the object, to cleanse the stuff out. The pentagrams have been used the other way around, where you use the pentagram banishing pentagram to clear an object. I don't feel like that's really the best purpose for the banishing pentagrams. If you want to get rid of all influence of, like, the earth element, you would use a banishing pentagram of earth. But if what you're looking at is to clear all these thought forms and things out of it, I really like the way it works, practically speaking, and how it feels to invoke the element, have the element run through it. Then you're basically doing the same thing as Bardon's method, but with the pentagrams. And of course, like all the magical stuff, the more you do it, the better it works. So you have to get accustomed to doing it, get used to using the pentagrams. But they can be quite effective and don't require the tools, so that's a nice way to cleanse something without having to have extra stuff. And I think that's just about it. I just wanted to talk a little bit on what this was all about, because I think their answers to these things are strung out through various videos, and in this case I thought I'd put them all in one place. I'll append to the end of this a list of the banishing, a little picture of the banishing and invoking pentagrams at the end of the video, so if you want to use those or print them out. But that's the basis of it. And for a little more background, in case anybody's interested, one of the reasons why the earth banishing works so well is the earth pentagram, why it can be used on its own. There are two aspects. The earth pentagram can be used on its own for banishing in general. So if you really need to be fast, you can use one pentagram, the earth element pentagram, banish everything with that, and it's not as thorough. But the reason that kind of works for everything is there are two reasons. Earth is a conglomeration of the other three elements create earth. So in one way, if you use earth, you're kind of like banishing with all the pentagrams. And the other aspect of earth is that it lends to an aspect of Saturn, analogies. So it's analogous to the Saturn current and the Akasha. And due to the Akashic Saturn connection, the Akasha is the spirit element. I'm sorry if I used an unfamiliar term. I have to remember that a lot of people are not familiar with these. So that is the one that's usually termed spirit in the pentagrams. It's also the Akasha, and since everything developed from it, if you know that connection and you use your earth banishing pentagram, you kind of get it from both ends. Probably going irrelevant and too far into detail, so I'm going to end it there. Blessed be.